It's the first time in a long time I've had my hair out. I gotta re-dye it. But it looks good. It looks nice and full. I am open for suggestions because I'm not gonna lie, I was thinking about going full ginger this fall. Let me know. What's good in the YouTube hood? It's your girl Luna Nova, and I'm back with another one for y'all today. There are a few things more unsettling than hearing your own name when no one else is supposed to be around. Tonight's compilation is not for the faint of heart. We're diving into the spooky realm of mimics. And yes, this is going to be a part 2. So if you didn't watch part 1, definitely go back and watch part 1. But yes, we are diving into the realm of mimics, and we're talking about those eerie entities that mimic not just voices. They copy loved ones, pets, even you. But something is always just off a bit. These stories will have you double checking your mirrors, your windows, and your doors. Because once you hear the whisper of something that calls your name that shouldn't be there, you'll never forget it. Trust me, I know.
Story time about how I had an encounter with a mimic. Now, I will say this happened this past year, but I had no idea what this was at the time. And I only just the past couple months started seeing videos because I like to listen to spooky stories on TikTok late at night. And I started seeing videos on TikTok about mimics. And I was like, oh my God, I think I encountered that. And the more research I did on mimics, the more I realized that that is exactly what I experienced. So here we go. About 6 months ago, I went to my brother's house to babysit his son. Him and his wife were gonna go out for a date night, and I was taking my 2 children with me, my 2-year-old daughter and my son who was about to be 4. So we get there, everything's good. My brother and his wife, they go off to go on their date. And me and the kids were just all chilling out. I'm gonna change their names for this story, but my nephew Benjamin, he did good the whole night, and my children did good, everybody was fine. Then bedtime came. Benjamin went down perfectly. He was an angel. My daughter, she went down pretty easy, and then it came time to put my son down, and him being the oldest of the 3, he doesn't go down as early as the other 2 do. So my son was laying in the guest bed with me, and we were just scrolling on social media together, and he was starting to fall asleep, and all I hear is my sister-in-law's voice from the hallway, and I hear, "Benjamin," and it was clear as day. So I'm thinking like, oh, she must be home. And my son, he goes, "Auntie, Auntie," and he starts getting up, and he like hears it too. So we walk out of the room to greet my brother and my sister-in-law, and nobody was there. Absolutely no one. At that point, I was really freaked out because I knew for a fact that I heard it, and it sounded exactly like my sister-in-law's voice. And I looked at my son and I was like, "Did you hear it? Did you hear Auntie?" And he was like, "Yeah, where is she?" And he's like looking for her. So I knew I wasn't crazy because we literally both heard it. Now I will say, I do believe in the supernatural myself. I just don't like to fuck around with it. So as soon as that happened, I just took my son back to the room. I made sure all the doors were locked and everything, and we just went back to the guest room and laid down in the bed, and I did not move a muscle, and I kept that door shut, and my daughter was in the room with me, and I kept watching the baby cam of my nephew Benjamin because I was honestly just so like thrown by that whole experience. So I want to say about 2 hours later, I hear the front door open and close, and I hear my brother's voice and my sister-in-law's voice. So at this point, I know for a fact that they're back. My son is asleep at this point, so I carefully walk out of the room and I greet them. And we start talking about their night. I asked how their date went. They said good. And then I asked them, "Did you guys go on the baby camera at any point, especially you?" And I asked my sister-in-law that. And I was like, "Did you talk to your son, like through the baby camera or anything?" And they both look at me very confused. And they were like, "No, like why?" And so I tell them what happened. And I was like, "This is what happened. I thought maybe I was just hearing things, but my son also heard it. So I know I was not the only person who heard it." And so my brother decides that he's going to check the security cameras in his house. So he checks the security cameras, and what comes up is he sees me and my son walking out of the room, and he hears our whole conversation of me saying, "Did you hear that too?" And my son going, "Auntie, yeah, where's Auntie?" And on the security camera, right after I ask my son, "Did you hear Auntie?" all you hear is this soft voice that sounded exactly like my sister-in-law's voice go, "Shh, be quiet." And you can hear it plain as day. And my brother freaked out. And he was like, these security cameras like that I have in like the living room, you can't even speak through. Like you can't. They're just like basic security cameras that can hear audio and video and record it. That's it. So at that point, we're freaked out, and he's like, even if somebody hacked into it, they wouldn't be able to speak through it. It's just not that type of camera, because we're trying to go through like all the rational like thoughts, right? So then I asked him, how old is this house? Because he was renting this place, and he told me that the house was built in the early 1940s. And I was like, well, do you know of anything like bad with this house? And he said he had no idea, because they were just renting from this company. I asked him and his wife if they ever experienced anything weird in that house, and they said that they weren't sure and that they didn't think so, but they both work full time and their son's in preschool, so it's not like they spend a lot of time there. So at that point, my brother decided to completely ignore that everything happened, and he felt too uncomfortable. And my sister-in-law said that she was creeped out and that she just wanted to go to bed and pretend like nothing happened. I said that I would never go back to that house after that because I just felt really freaked out. And the rest of the time that I was there, I felt like eyes were on me, and I couldn't tell if it was my anxiety or if it was actually something in the house with us. And since then, my brother and my sister-in-law have moved into an apartment, thank God. So they are no longer in that house. But yeah, that was a very terrifying experience for me. And the more research I did on mimics, the more I realized that that was what I encountered and that you're not supposed to interact with it. So I'm actually glad that I just did not interact with it, that instead I just stood up and walked out. I forgot to mention too that while I was laying in the bed with my son, before I walked out with my son, I did text my sister-in-law asking if they were home. And they didn't see my text until they got back. So this whole situation was just really creepy. But yeah, that was my experience with the mimic. Hope y'all enjoyed.
The clip that I'm about to show you is pretty unnerving, and I don't recommend watching it at night. So if it's nighttime, save this for the daytime. There is a creator on here that has one video on their account, and it's a lot. It's creepy. It's very creepy. So in the caption of this video or on the screen, they say that they just recently moved very close to the woods, and at their door every single night they are hearing the exact same sound. And this video of this sound at their door is the only video, at the time of me filming this at least, that they have posted. So let's look at that video. Guys, it is tricky living near the woods. Not everyone's gonna have an experience that lives there, but you are more likely to have a creepy experience living in the woods, I swear.
I grew up smack dab in the middle of Appalachia, and there's always been a story that's followed my family. And now, as I'm an adult and I can sit back and process it, I realize that it's a story about mimics. When I was younger, I just thought it was folklore. I just thought it was something like a story within my family, but I don't think it really was, and I'm going to tell you some details about it. Disclaimer, a lot of people in my family have had experiences with the little girl. I personally have not, but I'm going to tell you some of those secondhand experiences. And one of them, my dad told me about. For all of my childhood, I remember stories of the little girl. And this little girl was a small child, probably around the ages of 4 to 5 years old, who had long blonde hair and was always said to look like one of my cousins. Again, different people in my family had different experiences with the little girl. But I always remember the stories being that every time they saw her, or they saw a glimpse of her, they thought it was my cousin. And I don't remember it being malicious in nature, but I do remember her just popping up in random places, and everyone in my family knew the little girl or had a story of the little girl. So growing up in Appalachia and in the middle of nowhere in a rural community, it's super normal to live around all of your family. So I did that. My house was at the bottom of the hill, and then my grandparents' house was on the top. I had aunts and uncles that surround them, and my cousins. I come from a really big family, so I have tons of cousins, and my mom has 12 brothers and sisters. Anyway, so I remember my dad telling me the story of the one time he had the encounter with the little girl, who again looked like my cousin and had long blonde hair. So he was in the kitchen, and there was a window above the sink. He tells me that he was looking out of the kitchen window, and when you looked out, you could see the driveway where we would park our cars, the end of the driveway. And he was looking at the car, and he saw the little girl. But again, this looked like my cousin, so when he saw her, he assumed it was my cousin. I believe that I was at school. It was like the middle of a weekday, and I was at school, but my cousin at this time wasn't old enough to be in school, so he had thought that she had ran down and was playing around the cars. So he either walks outside or he walks to a window. I can't remember which one. And he calls her name and he was like, don't be playing around cars. And do your parents know you're here? And then he didn't see anything. In fact, it was almost like he saw somebody playing around the cars. And then when he went to go tell them not to, nothing was there. I believe there was a story my grandmother used to tell of she went into the kitchen one day. As she's walking into the kitchen, she sees the back of the little girl. Of course, she sees the long blonde hair, the build of the child, and she thinks it's my cousin. But again, I don't remember anything malicious about the stories because I always think mimics, I think malicious behavior, but the little girl never really was bad, evil, ill intent, I think, from the stories I can remember. So maybe it's not a mimic, maybe it's the spirit connected to my family, not sure. So I just text my cousin and asked her, did you ever see the little girl? And she responded in all capital letters, yes. So her story goes as follows, which jogged my memory, so now I can say I actually do have an experience with the little girl. My cousin reminded me of the story when she was playing with my other cousin upstairs in what we called the old house. And the old house was a 100-year-old plus farmhouse that my grandparents had lived in later in their life, and then my aunt and my cousins had moved in. So they're upstairs playing Barbies, and the way this is set up was the upstairs was our playroom, and there was toys everywhere, and then downstairs was the rest of the house. So they're upstairs playing Barbies, and they hear a little girl singing, "Ring around the rosy." Another time, my cousin was walking to my grandma's house, and again, my family all lived around the same holler, and she looked over to where my cousin, who the little girl always is said to look like's house, and she sees what appears to be my cousin peeking around the corner, but it wasn't her. She said she thought it was my cousin, but the little girl just turned around, giggled at her, and ran off into the woods. I reached out to another cousin who said he hadn't seen her firsthand, but he remembers stories that his mom had told him about. They were walking again up to my grandma's from their house, and they looked over and they saw the little girl who they thought was my cousin just peeking out around the corner of the house and then disappearing. So is the little girl a mimic, or is she just a friendly spirit that's attached to my family that just so happens to look like my cousin? I'm interested to know what you think about this story, and if you have any similar stories about energies, spirits, small children, etc., clinging on and being attached to your family, let me know in the comments below. If the little girl is a good spirit, is it common for spirits that have good intention to completely mimic people who are alive in the real world? Is it common for them to mimic their entire body language, their personality, the way they look? Everyone who has seen her or had an encounter with the little girl swears she looks just like my cousin. Anyways, let me know your thoughts.
I got you. This is the story of my family's experience with what I believe was a mimic, or at least displayed some very mimic-like behavior. This happened in my family home that I would eventually inherit from my father when it was just him and my brother living there. The house had kind of a weird history to it. It was like an artist's home, and she really built it in a very specific way to her tastes. Cut a lot of corners building it to make it really artsy. And she never ended up living there. So when she eventually sold it, my dad bought it and he and my little brother lived in it together. And things were pretty wonky as soon as they moved in. My brother says he went for a walk one time in the forest surrounding this area and found a perfect circle of animal bones with something in the middle, and he got a really bad feeling and just ran the other way back home. But the creepiest thing has to be the fact that for the first little while after they moved in, they would see each other walking in and out of rooms or leaving the house when they weren't there. My brother was sitting on the couch watching TV when he suddenly saw my dad walking out the front door, saw him open the door, close it behind him. He didn't say anything, but my brother didn't think much of it. He was just watching his show. And maybe 2 minutes after he saw my dad walk out the front door, saw the back of his head, saw him leave, his bedroom door opened right behind the living room, and my dad walked out, and there's no way back into his bedroom from the front yard unless he crawled through a window, which my 6'3" dad wasn't doing. Another example of this, I remember my dad telling me, was when he was using like this weight bench that we had upstairs. He was working out and he heard my brother walk in the front door and heard his voice downstairs say like, "Hey dad." My dad yells back like, "Hey," or something like that, and continues on with his workout. And a minute later, my brother walks out of his bedroom, which is like right next to this area where my dad was working out. They would hear each other's voices when they weren't home. Like my brother would be away for the weekend or something, and my dad would swear he could hear him talking and laughing upstairs. There was even this really weird incident where, again, on the workbench, one of them was working out on it when suddenly these bookshelves that they had against the walls started shaking like there was an earthquake, but it's Georgia and there like wasn't an earthquake. And they get up from working out to like see what's going on, and right as they get up, like something really heavy fell down from the bookshelf where it would have landed on their head if they had stayed on the bench. It got so bad they had someone out to cleanse the house, and that was always crazy to me because like my brother is kind of a skeptic, but my dad really truly was a skeptic. I think more in the sense that like he believed in the paranormal, so maybe not a true skeptic. He just had a really big respect for it. It was like, you don't acknowledge it, it doesn't acknowledge you. We don't talk about that kind of stuff. His only daughter grew up to tell people ghost stories on the internet. Who would have guessed? But it got so bad, I know they had someone out to cleanse the house. And again, this was like 10 years ago now. So I don't know exactly what went down or what the energy was like in the house after that. As far as it was told to me, they had someone out to cleanse the house, and pretty much in the next couple of days, things stopped completely and it never happened again. Both of them told me stories about this though, and both of them were really shaken up from it. Again, much more startling coming from my father, who didn't talk about the paranormal at all. If you guys want, and my brother is down, maybe sometime I can get him on to talk a little bit about his experiences in that house. But again, we inherited the house after my dad passed away, and in my experience there, I've had a couple of paranormal things happen, most of which I've talked about on my YouTube channel, but nothing quite like this. Nothing like a mimic. Like that, seeing the back of each other's heads, like hearing each other talk. I never really knew what it was called when they originally told me about it. But now that I look back, I'm like, oh, that was a mimic. You guys had a mimic in and around the house. The whole story is really fascinating. I think about it all the time till this day. It's one of the scariest stories I've ever heard, and I believe it completely because I know my dad and my brother, and neither one of them would just manufacture a ghost story for fun, especially because like I was the only person they were telling. I actually have like 2 other stories that I did experience that could be mimics, but I'm not really sure. If you guys want to hear those, I can keep the story times going, but hopefully you enjoyed this. You hear something calling your name when you're home alone, you see the back of someone's head when you're home alone, you didn't. You didn't. You ignore it. You lock yourself in a room. Don't acknowledge it. Stay safe and spooky, friends.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds...
Let's talk about my experience with a mimic. If you're new here, hi. I usually talk about the pretty scary stuff, and today I'm going to be talking about my experience with a mimic that happened this time 2 years ago. So let's get into it. So in October of 2022, I came home for the weekend from college, and I was at my boyfriend's house. His parents had gotten a wood wick candle and specifically told me to listen to this candle because it sounded cool with the crackling in the fall and the ambiance of spooky season. So the way that you need to understand the layout of this house is living room, kitchen, back dining room. The only doorway that I'm going to be talking about is through the dining room. So, I am typing away on my laptop that I have you propped up on right now, actually, and I'm really honing in on the sound because it did sound cool. I am completely immersed in my paper in this noise when all of a sudden I hear my boyfriend call my name from behind me. So I stop, I get up, I turn around, dark in the dining room. My boyfriend's parents did not hear it. And I'm calling out to him, right? I'm like, hello, Andrew. I walk into the dining room, and again, it's dark, so I kind of make my way around to the front of their home, and I look up the stairs and I see that my boyfriend's light is on in his room. So I snake the other way around, and I text him, I'm like, where are you? He says, I'm up in my room, what's up? The moment he said that, I had chills all over my body. And I specifically remember the living room that they have is like a sunken in living room. So you have to step down, and there's a banister like right next to the, like a railing right next to where you step down. And I had my back against that because right below that was where they were sitting. So they were faced away. So nothing could get me if my back was faced towards this banister. He comes downstairs, and I immediately am like, why did you do that? And I guess the color in my face was not there because he asked what was wrong or if I was feeling okay. By that point, his parents had paused the TV, and I was telling them what had happened, and they said that they didn't hear it and he wasn't trying to scare me or anything. So life went on. His family gets a dog in January of 2023. He is 10 years old. He's not a puppy. And I was out with my boyfriend one night. Mind you, I just wrote that complete situation out of my mind because I was like, you know what? Maybe I'm stressed out that I'm hearing stuff. I don't know. It had been an incredibly difficult semester, so that is what I wrote it off as. I'm out with my boyfriend, middle of winter. The next day we get to his house, and he had spent the night at my house, and his dad pulls me aside in private and was like, I heard it too. And by that point, I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, heard what? And he said, Andrew's voice. And immediately, again, I get chills because that was really scary. And he said the dog heard it too. So I immediately am like, what are you talking about? And then he tells me that last night he heard the door to the garage open and close, like Andrew had gotten home, and Andrew had slipped into the bathroom right next to the garage door and said something along the lines of like, hey, I'm home. And the dog got up and went to go investigate, and when he came back, Andrew's dad was like, it's weird, he's not out of the bathroom yet. He goes and checks, and the bathroom light is off, and the door is open. He walks upstairs because he's like, maybe he just slipped out of the bathroom, goes upstairs to my boyfriend's room. He is not there. And as he's telling me this, I'm like, oh my gosh. Because I at that point, I knew I wasn't crazy, and we were joking about, you know, like ghosts and whatever was there. Again, months had passed at this point, and his sister comes home to visit. And I don't remember how we got on the topic of the mimic that I was hearing and that his dad was hearing, but we somehow did in front of her, and she was like, I actually heard that too, and it wasn't Andrew's voice. And her story is, he walked me out, came back in, went straight to bed, and she heard someone walking on the main floor. She was in the basement, walking on the main floor, opening the fridge, shutting it, opened the basement door and called down to her twice in my boyfriend's voice. And when she responded and there was no answer, she went to go investigate. The lights are off on the main floor. She goes up to my boyfriend's room, and he is sound asleep. So that was probably March of 2023, and none of us have heard it since. I don't know what it was. I don't know why it was there. And the fact that multiple people, that's the kicker, multiple people heard the same voice, and it was always my boyfriend's voice. So I don't know what it was. And quite honestly, after researching mimics and having people tell me not to interact with them, if I heard it again, and I think the entity that is doing that knows this now, I would probably freak out and not respond. But anyways, that's going to do it for me. Stay tuned for more ghost stories.
Okay, this video is going to be for the paranormal side of TikTok. Specifically, I need advice, input, feedback, anything you got on mimics. What's been happening in my home over the past few months is very unsettling, and I would just really like some answers. I have lived in this home for 10 years. It's very, very old. I live in the hills of West Virginia. I don't have much history on the place. Who we bought it from is actually it's actually a family member of mine. And she doesn't have much information either on the place. I have asked neighbors, older people in the community. I've went to the courthouse and tried to find out what I can about the place. Nothing ever really comes up from it. So I'm turning here, and hopefully I can get some answers, or at least, some advice. Because, man, I have had a lot happen here over the past 10 years, pretty much from the time we moved in. Things had happened, but never a mimic, if that, I know mimics tend to copy voices and stuff. That's not happening. I'm seeing my family members, and it's not just me, others as well, have experienced this here. But the first thing that ever happened was I had gotten home from the grocery store, and I was putting my stuff away, and I went into the pantry, and I was putting things up high on the shelf, and I had my arms up and, looking up like this, and out of my peripherals I saw my daughter, who is 9 years old, and she's a prankster. She loves to scare me and stuff like that. But she had popped her head around the corner while I was doing that, like this, and just kind of stood there for a second. And I said, "I see you," like that. And she didn't say anything, and then took off back to her room. So I went after her shortly after, putting my stuff away, and I said, "Were you just in there?" And she said, "No." As a matter of fact, she was laying on her bed, on her stomach, with her headphones in, watching some video on her phone. She said, "No, I wasn't in there. Trust me, she would have claimed it. She loves to prank and play and all that stuff." It sent chills down my spine. I knew, I know it was her. Her height, her hair, curls. Did I look directly at her? Technically, no, but it was her, As a mother, I can say that was my kid. I know it was her. So that brings me to the next thing. Probably a week or two later, my husband and I were in bed, and we had just turned all the lights off to lay down. I wear contacts, so I normally switch to my glasses at night. I took my glasses off, sat them on the nightstand, and we rolled over for bed. I look over at the doorway, and I see my daughter. Now, I can't see a lick without my glasses or contacts. Like, my vision is like negative 5.25 and negative 6 in the other eye. Like, it's really bad. But everything's fuzzy. But in the doorway, I saw my daughter again standing there. And I said, "Hey, do you see her stand?" I said, "What's she doing? Is she playing with us again?" And about that time, she took off running back to her room. It was just a little unsettling. I don't know. She didn't say anything. It was just kind of weird. So I got up. I went to check on her. She was asleep. Not playing with me. Like, she was mouth open, snoring, asleep. But I saw, I saw her. Again, I did not see her. I had my glasses off. It was dark. But I have a nightlight in the hallway that illuminates, so if she needs to come to our room or whatever, we need to walk to the kitchen or whatever it may be, there's a little bit of light. So I saw her silhouette, and it was her. Okay. The next thing that happened was, again, probably a week or two, a few weeks later. I am the first to get up in the mornings to pack lunches and things like that. I was in there, and I thought I heard somebody behind me. I turned and looked, and I thought I saw my husband walk from the kitchen to the laundry room on his way out the door to go start the truck. It was cold, so he was going out there to start the truck. And I said, "Good morning," and he didn't respond. So I thought that was a little weird. And I went to see, what he was doing, and he wasn't there. The door wasn't open. The door hadn't been unlocked, anything. And I was like, man, I know. I just saw him, like I saw his robe, like it was like the tail end of his robe turn the corner. So I went on back to the bedroom, and he was still asleep. He wasn't even awake yet. So that definitely gave me chills. I was like, okay, okay. But what has kind of freaked me out the most is this next one. And it happened like 2 nights ago. My niece was staying the night with my daughter, and she is 13, almost 14 years old. She had said to me, "Hey, I didn't get much sleep last night." She said, "Pretty much from the time you had came in Ailey's room, I couldn't go back to sleep." And I said, "What? I wasn't in her room last night." And she was like, "It was like 1:30 or something in the morning." And she said, "It was after you plugged in her phone." And I was like, I wasn't in there. So I had her tell me exactly what happened. And she said, I came in their room and apparently plugged in a phone. She said she could hear the ding, when you plug in a phone. I put something in the basket that sits at the foot of my daughter's bed. So I plugged in the phone, put something in the basket, and then she said I went over and stood over my daughter and said something to her, and then left. I don't know, but I didn't. It wasn't me. She said she thought it was me. Just to clear it up, I asked my husband if maybe he went in there. He said he didn't. That one freaks me out. The thought of anything standing over my daughter at night just doesn't sit well with me. So, that's pretty much what's going on here. As you can see, this stuff really kind of upsets me. I get, hives or whatever. I get a little nervous talking about stuff like this because I don't know what it is. I don't have answers, So if anybody has any information, any kind of advice, anything that can help me out with this, I would greatly appreciate it. You can message me, comment, whatever. I would greatly appreciate it. I also have many more stories about this place that would probably freak you out. So, but anyway, that is my mimic story. Let me know.
Now that you've made it through the compilation, I have a confession for you all. I'm ready to tell my story. It's time. Yes, I have a mimic story of my own. This is why I said I know what it means to experience something calling your name that shouldn't be. So as you guys know, I currently live in Atlanta, Georgia, but I used to live in Covington, Georgia. And if you know anything about Covington, that might have to be another video on its own, but I digress. Covington is really nice, it's quiet, but a bit strange. Now, me personally, I absolutely love Covington and any country places like it because I'm a country girl deep down inside. I'm a country girl at heart. So I absolutely love it. But there was always this eerie feeling of something, I don't know, just watching me. I felt like I always had eyes on me. So one night I was doing my nightly rituals to go ahead and wind down for the night. And I was looking for my cat Oracle. Y'all remember my little fur baby, right? She was running around and I remember her, she was playing with one of her cat toys. And it was one of her heavier cat toys that had her little catnip and food treats inside, and so it sometimes would make a thumping noise whenever she would turn it over on its side. So that's what I thought I was hearing because it sounded like a thump, thump, thump. So again, I assumed that it was her playing with her toy. So eventually something told me to look under my bed because I couldn't find her. And so when I looked under my bed, she looked like she had just seen a ghost. My poor little baby looked so terrified. And then that's when I heard it, the knocking. I got a little closer and closer to try to figure out and pinpoint exactly where it was coming from. And the closer I got, I realized it was coming from the front door of my tiny home. So I knelt down to see exactly, again, pinpoint where the noise was coming from. And it sounded like it was coming from the very bottom corner of the door, which was odd, extremely odd, because you had to walk up a small set of stairs to get to the front of my tiny home. So it sounded like it was someone standing at the bottom of the stairs. It was weird because you couldn't reach the door from the bottom of the stairs. So again, I knelt down to get closer to the source of the sound, and that's when I heard it. Luna, knock, knock, knock. Luna, knock, knock, knock. Just like that. But it sounded like it was supposed to be my godmother. Like it sounded like her voice, but the tone was off, like a classic mimic signs. Like it sounded just like her, but her voice sounded so strange. Now this was extremely odd because I know my godmother. She's the type of person, she doesn't go out after dark without letting somebody know. And I know she wouldn't have come all the way over to my tiny home without calling me or letting me know that she was gonna walk over in the dead of night. Cause this was like 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. So I took a few steps back to see if I could look out of my window and see if I could see her from her window, from my window, if that makes sense. And when I took a few steps back, I looked and I could see my godmother walk past, getting ready to go to her bed. Because of how her room was set up, I knew when you walk past that window, she's going to get in her bed. So there's no way that she could have been knocking at my door. So immediately I knew exactly what I was dealing with. Whatever it was at that front door, I obviously knew it was not her. But luckily, I'm a hoodoo woman through and through, so of course I laid down some mojo, said some prayers, lit some candles, and after about 10 minutes, it was gone, and I never heard from it again. This is why I will always raise any of the babies in my life or my own to never answer something that they can't physically see with their eyes. So if you hear something calling your name and you can't lay eyes on it to know where that sound is coming from, don't answer it, because you don't know exactly what you might be inviting in. And all it needs is a simple invitation of a yes. But just be careful out there, y'all. Just because something sounds familiar doesn't mean it's safe. That's all I have for you guys tonight. I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up and edit it so I can push another one out for you guys. So make sure that you drink your water, mind your business, and stay prayed up and protected. And as always, Luna loves you. I'll be back with another video for you guys if the spirits allow it.
Give it right back, did they give it right back? This up, baby, can I sit right back? Wanna give it right back, baby, yeah, like that,